So Joe Biden and his administration recently came out and essentially gave a bunch of word salad to the issue of student debt. And he basically said that he was and was not going to do something about the outstanding student debt crisis that this country faces, which is typical of a politician, especially a Democratic politician, motioning that you may do something while also saying that you may not do anything. It's quite a wonder as to how they continue to pull this off. Now, with that being said, the simple notion that something may be done, no matter how insignificant it may be, though we all know if something is done, which it's unlikely, it will indeed be insignificant. It's all too characteristic of politicians, but in this case, a Democratic politician. People, a vast array of opponents of student debt cancellation in any way, shape, or form came out in droves to oppose this. And we saw a lot of arguments come out as a result of this, arguments that we've seen time and time again. And in this video, I would like to debunk these arguments, not to do anybody any particular favors, but because I think these arguments are ridiculous. And this is an issue that means quite a bit to me, simply because I am a student and I myself have my own fair share of debt, as I'm sure many of you do, whether it be student debt or not. And so I would like to go through this list that I compiled in chronological order and debunk the opposition points that I thought were the most relevant. So, of course, the Republican Party came out led by none other than Mr. Mitt Romney, with their fair share of attacks, accusing the Democrats of paying for votes and what have you because of their precarious political position right now. Now, while I agree that they are in a very precarious political position, the notion that one can pay for votes as if that's an actual thing is completely preposterous. But I believe that the Republican Party, much like the Democratic Party, is a bit too much of a joke at this point to even waste breath on criticizing, which is why we won't do that in this video. So the first issue that I would like to discuss is this framing of taking out student loans. They say that it's done, quote unquote, voluntarily. You did that of your own accord. And what they do with this opposition is they like to paint it as some sort of personal failing. It's your fault for taking out the loan. You shouldn't even had attempted to pursue a higher education in the first place. Well, you're an idiot. You should have just worked at the Shake Shack or the McDonald's. Or why did you want to become a doctor? What made you want to be a teacher? Why did you pursue this? You shouldn't have did it. You took out the loan. You knew what that implication was. And so it's this situation where these people are directing their ire at the borrowers instead of the system that imposed such a ridiculous situation on the borrowers who are actually the victims. This is a level of victim blaming that I don't see in regards to many other issues that face our society today. The next point that I would like to respond to is this: I had to pay mine, so they'll pay theirs. And this is a sentiment that comes from many people that pursued higher education, especially years ago. And one thing we know about college tuition is that it has exponentially risen in the past couple of decades, especially. Just an exponential amount. It's ridiculous what it is now. And so these people that went to college in like 1936, like they'll come out and say, oh, well, when I went to school, I paid off all my debt. Well, when you went to school, college cost about $100 and a pencil sharpener, and like half a Pop-Tart. And you were able to pay that off because it was so insignificant. We're not in that situation anymore. But also, I find this argument to be not only selfish, but quite diabolical. Allow me to explain. I'll just give you a couple of examples. Let's say, back when we used to have slavery in this country, when there were talks about abolishing slavery, right? What if slaves said, no, don't abolish slavery, because if you do so, then the people that come up next won't be slaves. And we were already slaves. So I feel like my children and my grandchildren and your grandchildren should also experience what it's like to be slaves. That's not hyperbolic. That's not fanatical. That's the exact same argument. That's the exact same selfish, diabolical argument. What about, let's say, women having the right to vote? What if a woman who said, well, I didn't get the chance to vote till I was in my 40s, that should be a rule for all women because I had to suffer? It's the same argument. I saw a pretty grand tweet that said, I got cancer and I beat my cancer. And after I beat my cancer, they came out with the cure to cancer. Now I'm mad at those who are going to get the cure. I mean, it's along that same line of thinking, and I think it's just extremely warped, and it doesn't have a place anywhere. The next one, and this is probably my favorite one for two reasons. A, it's the easiest to debunk. Two, it's probably the most effective in getting people to not support student debt cancellation. And that is the argument that it only helps the rich. It only helps affluent individuals. This is amazing. It's amazing because it's effective, but it's easily debunked. And it gets debunked in the following way. They say it only helps the rich. Well, by definition, if you're rich, that means you have an exorbitant amount of wealth. If you have exorbitant amounts of wealth, then debt, especially student debt, isn't that big of an issue for you, if any at all, because you have the money to pay for it. Rich people aren't the ones running around with the debt that they can't repay because they're rich. I mean, the answer to that argument is within the argument itself. I mean, it's really stupid. But as I alluded to, this argument here serves a purpose. And by the way, if you look up the statistics on the people that hold the vast majority of the student debt, it's working class people. It's people that are barely getting by. A lot of people still living with their parents, can't engage in the economy because of this debt that's holding them back. But as I said, this argument serves a purpose. It serves the purpose of breaking up class solidarity. If you come out and you tell other people that don't have student debt, but they may have debt of some other kind, mortgage debt, credit card debt, car debt, whatever the case may be, there's many kinds of debt in this country. This is a debtor's country. And I remind you, it serves a purpose. I won't get into that in this video, but it does. It creates splits between the class solidarity, because we're all working class. We're all within that term, but it's kind of like the class war that they play on individuals, getting white people to hate this minority, because if they didn't, they would otherwise team up and challenge the establishment, challenge the system, and know that they can change it if they're together, but they want to break us apart. But it does the working people such a disservice, because if you don't stand with other sectors of working people in their time of need, when their issue comes up, then the chances of them standing with you are very low. And we need to be able to stand with each other, because we're all we have in this capitalist system. We're the only allies that we have. Our allies definitely aren't in the business community. They definitely aren't the CEOs of these top companies. We do ourselves no favors fighting amongst each other. And it's also this other sentiment that goes along with all this, that somehow student borrowers, and I've seen this, aren't a part of the working class. I don't know if it's because they're students or if their debt is some special kind of debt, it relates to education, that they somehow don't have a place within the working class. That really, it's mind-boggling to me, because the working class isn't like made up of, coal miners and truck drivers. It's a vast array. It's a colorful group of people, that come from many different backgrounds. And, you're really doing yourself a big disservice by thinking otherwise. Now, this next one, and I believe this is the last point before I wrap this up, is that getting rid of student debt will hurt, here we go now, the taxpayers. It'll hurt the taxpayers, and it'll hurt the economy. Isn't it grand? Isn't it grand how when it comes to getting rid of debt that would overwhelmingly help working people, now all of a sudden it'll hurt the taxpayers, right? You see that propaganda they throw in there. So when we spend trillions of dollars, which is what we do, on the military, that doesn't hurt the taxpayers. And that's the taxpayer money that we're spending. When we bomb innocent people in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Somalia, in Yemen, that doesn't hurt the taxpayer, right? But that's their money. That's their money. When we bail out Wall Street after they crashed the economy 10 times over to the tunes of trillions of dollars, while on the back of the taxpayers. All this is done on the back of the taxpayers. They weren't worried about the taxpayer then. They're not worried about the taxpayer when they do these $1 trillion tax cuts, where all the 89% or 83% or whatever it is of the benefits go to the top 1%. No, never thinking about the taxpayers then. Never think about the taxpayers when the minimum wage is still $7.25. And it's been that way for years. No, 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 no. But now all of a sudden, they worry so much about the taxpayers. And on the economy, I've even seen some people trying to link this to inflation worsening. If you get rid of student loan debt, it'll worsen inflation. First of all, think about debt, or at the very least student loan debt, in this manner. The vast majority of the student loan debt is held by the federal government. It's quite literally as if the federal government saying, hey, all of you guys that have student loan debt by us, you no longer have to pay it back. It's fine. It's quite literally that simple. The country's not going to set on fire. It's not going to burn down. You're not going to get struck by lightning. Nothing of the sort. Okay? And on the issue of inflation, okay, if student loan debt is erased and prices go up, that's not the fault of the students nor the person who did the erasing of the debt. Who raises prices? Employers raise prices. The people that have the ability to raise prices raise them. The top CEOs of these companies, these shareholders, these executives, they raise prices. So if prices are raised as a result of any kind of debt cancellation whatsoever, you know who to blame, and it's not the people that took part in the debt cancellation. Now, as I said in the beginning, Democratic Party is incredibly corrupt. Or maybe I didn't say this, but they're incredibly corrupt, and you can expect nothing significant from them, no matter how much they plead you to believe them. I mean, it's pretty much set in stone at this point. This entire presidential tenure of the Democrats and Joe Biden has been a complete quagmire, and they're looking at a sweep in these next upcoming elections that they've quite earnestly earned, to be completely honest with you. But I wanted to bring in this video because I didn't want you to allow yourself to be fooled that, by these con artists into thinking that somehow student debt cancellation is a bad thing and it somehow shouldn't happen. And I'll just reiterate a tweet that I read, I thought was pretty golden. And the tweet went as follows: if student debt cancellation actually helped the rich, they would have done it a very long time ago.